the pride of the cities. As Mr. Kipling famously said, "The cities are full of pride, challenging each to each." Indeed, they are. New York City, however, was strangely subdued. 200,000 of its inhabitants were away for the summer, leaving 3,800,000 behind to mind the shop and pay the bills of their absent brethren. These 200,000, however, were a costly lot. A New Yorker, perched at a table in a rooftop garden, sought solace through a straw, his Panama hat resting on a nearby chair. The July audience was scattered amongst the vacant seats, much like outfielders when a star hitter steps up to the plate. Vaudeville performances unfolded intermittently, while a cool breeze wafted in from the bay. Stars twinkled above and around, illuminating everything except the stage. Waiters, startled by the sudden influx of patrons, flitted about like chamois, their movements almost invisible. Those who had the foresight to order refreshments via telephone that morning were now being served. The New Yorker was aware of certain shortcomings in his comfort. The drinks were warm. The ballet was suffering from a lack of both melody and powder. But a contented smile beamed from behind his rimless eyeglasses. His family was out of town, and they wouldn't be back until September. Then, stumbling into the garden, came a man from Topaz City, Nevada. The gloom of a solitary sightseer clung to him, his face as forlorn as a widower's in a hall of pleasure. He was consumed by a thirst for human companionship, panting in the metropolitan draft, his eyes scanning the crowd. He was drawn to the New Yorker's table like a moth to a flame. The New Yorker, disarmed by the relaxed, almost lawless atmosphere of the rooftop garden, decided to abandon his usual cautious demeanor. He resolved to shatter the conventions that had governed his life with one rash, daring act, a moment of impulsive, hair-brained abandon. With this radical, spontaneous inspiration, he gave a slight nod to the stranger as he approached his table. In an instant, the man from Topaz City was added to the New Yorker's list of closest friends. He pulled a chair to the table, propped his feet on two others, tossed his wide-brimmed hat on a fourth, and launched into a detailed account of his life story, as if speaking to a long-lost comrade. The New Yorker thawed slightly, much like an apartment house furnace warming up as the strawberry season begins. A waiter, foolish enough to venture near, was captured and promptly paroled on an errand to the Dr. Wiley experimental station. The ballet, in a musical fit of whimsy, was performing as Bolivian peasants, dressed as Norwegian fisher maidens in some parts, ladies-in-waiting of Marie Antoinette in others, their clothing strategically revealing, a la sea nymphs, and presenting a picture of a Central Park West housemaid social club at a fish fry. "Been in the city long?" the New Yorker inquired, calculating the exact tip he would give the waiter upon his return, ensuring no large change would be left to tempt him. "Me?" the man from Topaz City replied. "4 days? Ever been to Topaz City?" "Aye," the New Yorker exclaimed. "I've never been farther west than 8th Avenue. I had a brother who died on 9th, but I met the cortege at 8th. There were a bunch of violets on the hearse, and the undertaker mentioned the incident to avoid any confusion. I can't say I'm familiar with the West." "Topaz City," the man who occupied 4 chairs declared, "is one of the finest towns in the world. I presume that you have seen the sights of the metropolis," the New Yorker said. 4 days is not enough time to see even our most notable points of interest, but one can certainly get a general impression. Our architectural supremacy is what generally strikes visitors most forcibly. Of course, you have seen our Flatiron building. It is considered— "Saw it," the man from Topaz City interrupted. "But you ought to come out our way. It's mountainous, you know, and the ladies all wear short skirts for climbing and—" "Excuse me," the New Yorker said, "but that isn't exactly the point. New York must be a wonderful revelation to a visitor from the West. Now, as to our hotels— Say, the man from Topaz City interrupted, that reminds me, there were 16 stage robbers shot last year within 20 miles of— I was speaking of hotels, the New Yorker said patiently. We lead Europe in that respect. And as far as our leisure class is concerned, we are far— Oh, I don't know, the man from Topaz City said with a shrug. There were 12 tramps in our jail when I left home. I guess New York isn't so— Beg pardon, you seem to misunderstand the idea. Of course, you visited the stock exchange and Wall Street, where the— Oh yes, the man from Topaz City said, lighting a Pennsylvania stogie, and I want to tell you that we've got the finest town marshal west of the Rockies. Bill Rayner, he took in 5 pickpockets out of the crowd when Red-Nosed Thompson laid the cornerstone of his new saloon. Topaz City don't allow— Have another Rhine wine and seltzer, the New Yorker suggested, trying to steer the conversation back to familiar territory. I've never been west, as I said, but there can't be any place out there to compare with New York. As to the claims of Chicago, One man, the Topazite said. One man only has been murdered and robbed in Topaz City in the last 3. Oh, I know what Chicago is, the New Yorker interjected. Have you been up Fifth Avenue to see the magnificent residences of our Millie? Seen 'em all. You ought to know Rube Stegall, the assessor of Topaz. When old man Tilbury, who owns the only 2-story house in town, tried to swear his taxes from $6,000 down to $450.75, Rube buckled on his 45 and went down to— Yes, but speaking of our great city, one of its greatest features is our superb police department. There is no body of men in the world that can equal it for— That waiter gets around like a Langley flying machine, the man from Topaz City remarked, his eyes fixed on the elusive waiter. We've got men in our town, too, worth $400,000. There's old Bill Withers and Colonel Metcalf and— Have you seen Broadway at night? The New Yorker asked politely, attempting to regain control of the conversation. There are few streets in the world that can compare with it. When the electrics are shining and the pavements are alive with 2 hurrying streams of elegantly clothed men and beautiful women, attired in the costliest costumes that wind in and out in a close maze of expensively— Never knew but one case in Topaz City, the Westerner said, his voice even. Jim Bailey, our mayor, had his watch and chain and $235 in cash taken from his pocket while— That's another matter, the New Yorker said, attempting to regain his composure. While you are in our city, you should avail yourself of every opportunity to see its wonders. Our rapid transit system. If you was out in Topaz, the man from Topaz City interrupted, I could show you a whole cemetery full of people that got killed accidentally. Talking about mangling folks up. Why, when Barry Rogers turned loose that old double-barreled shotgun of his, loaded with slugs, at anybody— Here, waiter, the New Yorker called, his voice rising. 2 more of the same. It is acknowledged by everyone that our city is the center of art and literature and learning. Take, for instance, our after-dinner speakers. Where else in the country would you find such wit and eloquence as emanate from Depew and Ford and— If you take the papers, the Westerner interrupted, you must have read of Pete Webster's daughter. The Websters live 2 blocks north of the courthouse in Topaz City. Miss Tilly Webster, she slept 40 days and nights without waking up. The doctors said that— Pass the matches, please, the New Yorker said, his voice regaining a semblance of composure. Have you observed the expedition with which new buildings are being run up in New York? Improved inventions in steel framework and— I noticed, the Nevadian said, that the statistics of Topaz City showed only 1 carpenter crushed by falling timbers last year, and he was caught in a cyclone. They abuse our skyline, the New Yorker continued, and it is likely that we are not yet artistic in the construction of our buildings. But I can safely assert that we lead in pictorial and decorative art. In some of our houses can be found masterpieces in the way of paintings and sculpture. One who has the entree to our best galleries will find— "Back up!" the man from Topaz City exclaimed. "There was a game last month in our town in which $90,000 changed hands on a pair of tarumpt-tara," the orchestra announced, signaling the end of the performance. The stage curtain, blushing pink with the word asbestos inscribed upon it, descended with a slow, midsummer movement. The audience trickled leisurely down the elevator and stairs. On the sidewalk below, the New Yorker and the man from Topaz City shook hands with alcoholic gravity. The elevated train roared past. Surface cars hummed and clanged. Cab drivers swore. Newsboys yelled. Wheels clattered with ear-piercing intensity. The New Yorker, hoping to clinch the preeminence of his city, came up with a final argument. "You must admit," he said, his voice laced with a hint of desperation, "that in the way of noise, New York is far ahead of any other." "Back to the Everglades," the man from Topaz City interrupted. "In 1900, when Sousa's band and the repeating candidate were in our town, you couldn't—" The rattle of an express wagon drowned out the rest of the words. The two men, now mere strangers, disappeared into the cacophony of New York City, each convinced of the unparalleled qualities of their respective towns. The end. If you liked the story, hit that like button and subscribe for more videos. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Was there anything that surprised you? Who's your favorite character in the story? I can't wait to hear your thoughts.